How does a nation go from being the rising star of the modern world to a desperate gambler staking its entire existence on a global catastrophe? Today, we dive into the dark decade of Japan, a period where economic brilliance met military madness and where a single earthquake triggered a chain of events that would lead to the most brutal war in human history. This is the story of Japan's descent into the abyss. In our previous video, we explored how Japan transformed from a medieval society into a global industrial power between 1854 and 1918. As the 1920s dawned, Japan was a force to be reckoned with. It possessed a hard-working population, a functioning constitutional democracy by Far Eastern standards, a massive industrial base, and undisputed political and military dominance in the Western Pacific. The Meiji Restoration was complete, and Japan had emerged from World War I not just as a victor, but as a solidified great power. But in 1923, nature struck a devastating blow. The Great Kanto Earthquake leveled Tokyo and Yokohama, claiming over 100,000 lives. Yet the tragedy in the ruins was only the beginning. In the chaos that followed, dark rumors spread, claims that Koreans were poisoning wells and committing arson. Driven by ultra-nationalist fervor and a desire for revenge against Korean resistance to Japanese occupation, vigilante groups began a horrific massacre. Thousands of Koreans were murdered based on nothing but a lie. The government used this turmoil to tighten its grip. Under the guise of restoring order, socialist and anarchist leaders were systematically assassinated. By 1925, the Peace Preservation Law was enacted, effectively dismantling any left-leaning political opposition. Japan was left with only two mainstream options, the liberals and the conservative right. Soon, the conservatives would drift toward extreme nationalism. The economy was the next to fracture. In 1927, a massive banking crisis erupted. The cause was a classic economic failure, years of rapid growth masking poor credit management and toxic assets. When the government hinted at tightening the funding for earthquake bonds, discounted notes issued to aid recovery, panic ensued. A verbal slip by the finance minister triggered a bank run, leading to the collapse of 37 banks. This consolidation only made the big four zaibatsu firms even more dominant over the financial markets. Then came the Great Depression of 1929. Japan's exports plummeted by nearly 50%. To survive, manufacturers slashed prices, leading to a brutal deflationary spiral. Between 1929 and 1931, wholesale prices dropped by 30%, agricultural products by 40%, and textiles by 50%. This was exacerbated by a disastrous attempt to return to the gold standard at pre-war levels. The suffering was unimaginable. In rural areas, famine took hold. Heartbreaking records show that some families were forced to trade their daughters just to obtain basic necessities for survival. As the people suffered, the military, a powerhouse that consumed vast national resources, began to fracture. A rift opened between the Navy, whose officers were often more cosmopolitan and worldly, and the Army, which became the breeding ground for ultra-nationalist ideologies. The belief in Japan's divine mission grew. Since 1868, state Shintoism had been used to ensure absolute obedience to the emperor. This effectively silenced dissent and modern democratic critique. Having won every conflict since 1868, against China, Russia, and in World War I, Japan felt invincible. Many believed the only way out of the economic crisis was through Lebensraum, living space, and military expansion. In 1931, the fuse was lit. While some historians mark this as the true start of World War II, it was undeniably the point of no return. The Kwantung Army, Japan's forces in Manchuria, acted without government approval. They sabotaged a Japanese-owned railway and used it as a pretext to invade Manchuria. The Chinese government, weakened by internal conflict between nationalists and communists, could not resist. Chiang Kai-shek famously remarked, "The Japanese are a disease of the skin, but the communists are a disease of the heart." The League of Nations offered nothing but empty protests. Western powers, crippled by the Depression, looked away. This inaction was noted with great interest by Benito Mussolini in Italy and a rising Adolf Hitler in Germany. Back in Tokyo, the atmosphere turned bloody. When the government tried to limit naval spending in 1930 through the London Naval Treaty, ultra-nationalists responded with the assassination of the Prime Minister. Coups and political murders became the new tools of policy. However, there was a brief moment of economic hope. Viscount Takahashi Korekiyo, the finance minister, often called the Keynes of Japan, performed a miracle. He abandoned the gold standard, lowered interest rates, and allowed the yen to devalue by 60% against the dollar. By cutting military spending and increasing public works, he led Japan out of the Depression years before the rest of the world. But societies in crisis often destroy those who save them. In 1936, during the February 26th incident, Takahashi was assassinated in his bed by an army junta. The army, furious at his budget cuts, occupied Tokyo for 4 days. Though the emperor eventually ordered them back to their barracks, the damage was done. The death of Takahashi was for Japan what the death of Gustav Stresemann was for Germany, the end of the last chance for peace. In 1937, the Kwantung Army provoked a new clash at the Marco Polo Bridge. Japan declared full-scale war on China. It was one of the bloodiest conflicts in history. Cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Nanjing fell. In Nanjing alone, 350,000 civilians were massacred. By now, Japan was a total war economy. Everything from steel production to yellow labor unions was controlled by the state and the zaibatsu. By 1940, 70% of the national income went to the military. Basic goods were rationed. In a final act of hubris in 1939, the Kwantung Army challenged the Soviet Union at the border, but they met General Georgy Zhukov. The Soviets crushed a Japanese division with armored and air superiority. Chastened, Japan signed a peace treaty with the Soviets that would last until the final week of the war. Japan was now a desperate gambler. China was a quagmire, the Soviets were a wall of steel, and the economy was strained to the breaking point. The military juntas, now in total control, decided to raise the stakes one last time. The next bet would be on the Pacific War. The stage was set. With the moderates dead and the military in control, Japan turned its eyes toward the U.S. Pacific Fleet. But was this a strategic masterstroke or a suicide mission? Subscribe and hit the bell icon, because in our next episode, we witness the fire and steel of the Pacific Theater. Don't miss it.